the scene. But right now, let's talk TV. Yeah, one of the greatest theme tunes from one of the greatest TV shows to come out in the last couple of years, Game of Thrones, of course. And if you're not watching Game of Thrones, you're not watching TV, basically. It's that's what I would say. And if it's been certainly a topic of conversation on this feature over the past few months, with Chris Philpott from stuff.co.nz talking TV stuff with us. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you very much. And Game of Thrones has wrapped up finally on New Zealand TV, although it wasn't too far behind American. And that's something that's a trend that we've seen change over the last year or so, is TV shows getting to New Zealand a whole lot sooner, right?
Well, I think with Game of Thrones, especially, it's an HBO show, and with the advent of Soho starting last year, I think they've put a real focus on making sure that we're only a couple of weeks behind the US at the most. Game of Thrones was airing, I think it was 7 days exactly behind the Americans. It was airing in America on a Monday afternoon, and then it was airing here in New Zealand the following Monday night. So it was a weekend, about 4 hours, give or take. But definitely good to have it on, and good to be pretty close behind our American brothers.
And we'll wrap up Game of Thrones shortly with our thoughts on the second season. But first up, some interesting news out of the Disney Channel.
Yeah, they've made a decision to ban all advertising of. They've defined it as candy, sugar cereal, and fast food on their channels. Now, Disney, of course, is the most watched channel for kids. In America, the ratings for like Disney XD, which is the American equivalent of the Disney Channel, it shows things like Good Luck Charlie and your Hannah Montana reruns. I'm not a huge watcher of the channel. My daughter loves it.
Sure.
But it really does rate huge. You know, it's up in the sort of 6 to 8 million per episode ratings, which is quite high compared to a lot of stations, a lot of networks. And what they've done now is decided that there's going to be no junk food advertising on their channels. The junk food ban extends to, as I say, Disney XD, onto children's programming across other channels owned by Disney. For example, ABC is a Disney-owned company, ESPN is a Disney-owned company, and then across their Disney channel, Disney radio stations, websites. Disney Junior, I think, is another channel of theirs, but that one doesn't really play any advertising as it is because it's for 2-year-olds. But it's an interesting move. Disney hasn't said how much it's going to affect their bottom line, what kind of lost revenue they'll have because of this decision, but they're going ahead with it anyway, and much to the pleasure of a lot of different groups. I think Michelle Obama is one who's been trying to fight child obesity during her time as the First Lady, and she's really come out in support of this move. So it's a big move. It is a big move.
At the end of the day, right, a company like Disney, though, will want to be making a change, you know, that will increase their bottom line. So they must have done some kind of research or found another form of income revenue to offset the loss of the fast food. Maybe healthy choices, sort of type meals, are going to fill that spot.
It's possible. I mean, they're playing their cards close to their chest. They haven't revealed any details, but reading the stories about it online and watching an interview, I watched an interview with the CEO of Disney, whose name has escaped me, but he seemed fairly confident. He didn't seem like, you know, we're going into unknown territory here. Definitely, as you say, they've researched it. They know that this is going to be a good move for their bottom line in the long run. And it'll be interesting to see what they do next, whether we start seeing lettuce advertisements during Hannah Montana reruns or something like that, you know, fresh vegetables.
Come get your lettuce, kids.
What you won't see is McDonald's advertising.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the other thing too, which is product tie-ins. Oftentimes you'll see McDonald's and Burger King, you know, the little toys you get with the kids' meals will be based on Disney characters or Disney products, and it'll be interesting to see if that continues as well.
Depends on whether or not, like, McDonald's is banned outright, or a certain type of meal from McDonald's. So maybe they'll just go for the healthy choices. That'd be interesting to see anyway. Let's move on from that. Season 5 of Mad Men, its most watched season to date. In fact, I saw the final episode last night, but I guess we won't talk about that just yet.
Well, we'll segue into that. Yeah, Mad Men has become this year a critical darling, and it's also this year become kind of a really popular show. It's one of these interesting programs because everyone talks about it, but it doesn't seem to have the big ratings that you would expect from a show which really... I mean, in a lot of ways, Mad Men kind of informs the zeitgeist of the moment, where it is this big talking point, but as I say, finding people who are watching it is a hard mission as well.
Really?
I think what's happened with Mad Men is the ratings have gone up. I mean, it's up this season 5, has finished up 15% on season 4. So the average rating per week is up as well. The finale was one of the most watched episodes of the show ever. I think that was way up on season 4, and it's doing really well in its core demo, which is, I think it aims for the 25 to 54 demographic, and it's really up around about 13% in that demo as well. But it's interesting because, as I say, Mad Men is a show which everyone talks about, but which the ratings didn't seem to match up to how talked about it was, and now they're sort of coming back into line, possibly segueing, I guess, into talking about the season. If you haven't watched it, or you're watching it on Soho, perhaps there's a few spoilers here, but I think this season has been a lot more accessible for casual viewers, perhaps. What do you think of that?
Casual viewers, I don't know. That's hard because so much of it still relies on a little bit of backstory behind those characters, about why Don Draper does what he does, and why how he got into the relationship with his current wife, and how he relates to his previous wife, and the character. I think you really do. I don't think you could just dive into season 5. You do need to go back to the beginning. I'm quite firm on that. I think with most TV, you've got to work your way through. I don't think it's a casual snacker.
Maybe casual's the wrong word, but it's this season hasn't been as subtle. Maybe is the word I'm looking for. The older seasons, it were really, like season 2 and 3 especially, you had to be watching really closely to pick everything up. There was a lot of subtext going on in the show, and things weren't really spelled out clearly, whereas I think this year that's kind of changed a little bit, where storylines are a bit more obvious, and whether this is coming down to the quality of the writing, I don't know, but things are spelled out a lot more clearly. People will say the obvious line now, where before they might not have said the obvious line that sort of framed the whole scene.
That said, though, wasn't it a cracker season? I thought it was fantastic. Loved it.
I haven't seen through to the end. I've read ahead on what happens, but on Soho, we're up to episode 10, and I have to say it's the best season of the show so far for me. And part of that comes down to, I don't think it's not as intense to watch. It's a bit more relaxed to watch. You can enjoy it a little bit easier because everything is a little bit clearer. You're not sort of thinking so hard about, well, why has that happened? You're not having to recall scenes from earlier episodes as often. Things, as I say, are a little bit more obvious than in years past, and that's made it a little bit more entertaining, a little bit more enjoyable to watch.
I also like the fact that that they are still dealing with the industry of advertising and ad men, and that is still strong. It features prominently in the program, pitching to clients. I still love that. They're still, of course, dealing with all the, how the characters evolve, but keeping with the core business of advertising. I still really appreciate that, and they haven't gone away from that. There's no spoilers here, but you expect a few big bombshells to drop, and the final show. I love the dealing of reality versus desire, and that's not giving anything away. It's just they've worked that one out fantastically. Cannot talk enough about Mad Men season 5. Check it out.
Yeah, no, it's been really good. It's been really good.
Yeah, so let's wrap up Game of Thrones season 2.
Yeah, well, what's to say about it? I mean, it was the best show on TV this year. In my opinion, at least. I thought it was. Every episode was brilliant. The last 2 episodes, Blackwater being the second to last episode, in which Stannis finally arrives at King's Landing and tries to take over the city with that big nuclear explosion out in the middle of the water, thanks to the wildfire that Tyrion had sent out there.
Yeah.
That episode was probably the best episode of the series from both seasons for me. And I wrote about this yesterday on the blog. I think the reason is it was more focused. The show is really, it's sprawling all over the place. It's, Westeros has become this big fictional land now, filled up with all these characters, and it's becoming harder and harder to service the characters on a week-to-week basis. And I think Blackwater succeeded because it didn't try to do that. It was purely about Stannis Baratheon and his people, and then Tyrion and the Lannisters at King's Landing, and it didn't, fly away to Karth and try and, work Daenerys into it. It didn't go north of the Wall and have another, Jon Snow being led around to the middle of nowhere by some wildling hostage captor person.
Yeah.
And because it was so focused, I think it really did a great job of telling that story. I know there's been some complaint that it wasn't as true to the book as perhaps it could have been, but I thought that was the best episode of the series. As I say, across both seasons, I thought it was fantastic. And then the last episode, which we had on Monday night here, I thought was the second best episode this year. Certainly, I joked in the blog that it tried to make every scene a cliffhanger, but it did seem like for an entire hour everything that happened there was important, and it served all of the characters well. It was a little bit scrambling, jumping around all over the place, but did a really good job. What did you think?
Well, basically, I think, you're right. The last episode, it was good, but it was serving a purpose. It was saying, okay, we've got all these story threads all over the place. Let's just tie them all up here in the last episode to set it up for the next season. So it was sort of a, it was good, but it was, it filled a function, the final episode, I think, for the series.
Well, I think the whole season was kind of like that. You kind of get the sense where season one was telling a story, and that story was sort of Ned Stark's story, I guess you could say. The season two was kind of setting everyone up for season three. Is more the kind of vibe that you got from it. It wasn't really its own self-contained story. It's more, the show wasn't about Daenerys and Karth. It was setting Daenerys up for everything that's going to happen next. Jon Snow wasn't north of the Wall because there was something important to do. He was north of the Wall because meeting Mance Rayder is the important part, and that's going to happen next season. Theon Greyjoy's story, for example, is another one. He took over Winterfell, and we got some great character moments from him, but the whole story seemed to set up Bran and Rickon being sent somewhere away from Winterfell, and Theon being taken captive somewhere, which we'll find out next season what's happening there, of course. It wasn't really its own self-contained thing. There were some great moments, but as I say, it seemed like it was setting everyone up for what's coming next.
Yeah, and I, for one, am very happy, not having read the book, so I don't know how long his character actually lasts, but Peter Dinklage will be sticking around for Series 3, and I'm happy about that.
I think he would have to. A lot of people would stop watching, I think, if Tyrion disappeared from the show. And Peter Dinklage, as you say, just a revelation on Game of Thrones. He's absolutely fantastic in the role. Perfect casting.
Yeah.
And it'll be great to see what he does next at King's Landing. It was cool to see that he knows that that's where he should be, just as much as we all know that that's where he should be. So it'll be, as I say, interesting to see what happens next.
All right, let's look at what's happening on TV this week.
Well, we've got a few new shows, of course. Game of Thrones finishing on Mondays leaves a big gap. First up, we've got Golden, which is a new Kiwi comedy starring Lucy Schmidt as an Olympic rower called Shelley Bowman, who has gone a bit overweight since winning gold at the Olympics and is forced to get into shape for the 2012 Games. Also stars Jesse Griffin and Joel Toback, who are two guys that I really like. That starts on Sunday at 7 on TV3. And then Monday night, filling the Game of Thrones gap, we've got Grimm and Skins starting on 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. Grimm is a new fantasy procedural, kind of Criminal Minds crossed with Once Upon a Time, and Skins, of course, is the show for young people written by young people. It's the uber realistic teen drama that starts at 9:30 on 4 on Monday. And Pillars of the Earth, which is an interesting one. It's a historical epic miniseries, starts Monday 8:30 on Soho, based on Ken Follett's novel. I think a lot of people have read that. I'm not too familiar with it, but it looks like it should be an interesting show. It's got a great cast. Ian McShane is one of the main stars. Of course, he played Jurgensen on Deadwood, which is another brilliant show.
Yeah.
So be interested. Sorry, not Jurgensen, Swearingen.
Swearingen, yes. San Francisco.
How did I get that name wrong?
Yes. Fantastic, Chris. I really enjoyed talking TV over the past few months. Fantastic. It's been a great way to indulge in my probably number one